Have you ever felt that a video game turned way too overwhelming by the sheer number of options given to you? Or the other way around, that it was practically barren and you had no options at hand? To me, the customization in an RPG is one of the most important topics, because I believe that the essence of many games lies in those details. For example, if you can have a class, subclass, combination of classes, the impact of your equipment, active, passive skills, held items, and so on. In a sense, I like to compare it with something like cooking a sandwich. It can be simple and taste good, but sometimes adding some extra ingredients can enhance its flavor. But be careful, throwing too much into the mix and it may lose its charm. Now, as many other videos of this nature, I can only speak for myself. However, I'll try to give as much insight of where the answer may lie for different kinds of execution. But let me know, which RPG do you consider had the right number of things to consider while playing around? Okay, we cannot look at customization alone, because a video game combines multiple things together. For example, time invested, the overall progression, difficulty, and so on. I know those things may feel off topic, but before jumping into why they have to be analyzed, if you ask me, okay Alex, what is your opinion? Do you prefer a complex game or a simple one? If I had enough time, I would prefer complex games, where you can dive into multiple options, all of them delivering different results. I know this may not surprise some people, as some of you know I am a mechanical engineer, so while some were getting handed by Baldur's Gate, I was getting handed by El freaking Baldur. Heat transfer, mechanical design, etc, etc. Even in my line of work, I like to crack my head around those complex 3K plastic components. So no wonder I have fun finding dumb answers in places people oftentimes don't even think about. For example, PlanetSide 2 is a first-person shooter with, let's say, some RPG elements. Well, the thing is that down the line, the devs added some side skills, and while it wasn't that complicated to get different things, like 98% of the people overlooked the carapace implant. In the eyes of many, it wasn't worth it. But for someone who likes to run some numbers, you had me butchering entire groups because it was stupidly easy to exploit. But of course, you needed to understand some things left and right. But now, thinking in the previous ideas. How long is a video game is a big factor once we dive into customization. Don't think it is that big of a deal? Let's check polar opposites. Operation Abyss is a JRPG where you can add only one class per character, and everything else is decided through equipment. You do not have skill trees or anything like that. So of course, spending 55 to 60 hours in just the main story for some may feel like a torture, but that is a wizardry-like RPG following almost the same steps. While on the other hand, we have Nights in the Nightmare, a strategic RPG from the Dead Heaven games, where you needed to keep so many things in mind while also avoiding whatever came your way. And it was quite frustrating if you wanted to get every key item, check dialogues, and keep the whole army alive. And it is not like this game is that long. It takes like 27 hours if you rush through some parts. But those 27 hours can feel as tortuous as the 55 from Operation Abyss. In any case, let's dive with player experience, as it may be one of the biggest factors, at least while considering some subgenres. I would argue that for someone who has seen a fair share of mechanics, most likely a middle ground may be much more enjoyable. With this I mean entries like Chrono Trigger, Octopath Traveler, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, some Tales games, entries where oftentimes you don't have to farm, but they may ask you to switch strategies at some point. Newers may have fun with something that is between simple and middle ground, as they are still experiencing different entries, so everything feels quite fresh and exciting. So games like Pokémon, some gachas, the cozy ones as Rune Factory, or some Mario RPGs may sit quite well, as you don't need to particularly crack your head as you play around, at least the main stories, because some entries like Pokémon may turn quite complex once you decide to jump into competitive battles. As for veterans, this is where I would start to argue different subgenres, at least for what I have seen, because if we talk about action RPGs, entries like Ys are quite accepted, and they are really basic, at least for the topic at hand, as oftentimes you just have to change gear, level it up, reach a new area, rinse and repeat. However, they are fast-paced entries, so the lack of customization is balanced with dynamic gameplay. Nonetheless, games like Path of Exile are stupidly famous, but I am almost sure that most of the times we talk about veterans. If we start to check turn-based RPGs, I will say that it works the other way around. If it is too simple as the aforementioned Operation Abyss, I'm sure that most people will tend to abandon those games. In contrast, with an RPG that invites to experiment between at least a class, a subclass, maybe some skills in between, considering that most RPGs throw equipment in different towns, but just to patch some attack and defense. So entries like Xenoblade Chronicles X, The Legend of Heroes, Metaphor, and Etrian Odyssey 3 come into mind. If we jump into the niche side with the RPGs, I'm sure that more often than not, people enjoy deep and complex customizations, as the nature of these games tends to be quite passive, and that is where entries like Stranger of Sword City or Labyrinth of Galeria come into play, but this is more about a combination between complex choices plus a harsh journey. Strategic RPGs may be the trickiest, because they tend to be the most passive ones in nature, having to think into your next step perhaps a bit too much. So most experienced players seek hard entries with harsh learning curves, like Baldur's Gate, Divinity Original Sin, Pathfinder, XCOM. So, as cheap as it may sound, the right balance isn't as simple as it may seem to be. Reason why I said that it is a combination from multiple factors, not only limited to customization, even if we just analyze gameplay alone. Perhaps it was a long week, and maybe you just want to play something simple, but that is adding more factors into the topic. With this, I hope you found this video informative. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.